journalism, in community journalism. There just isn't. Folks want to be able to trust us, right? So we can't just be jerks. You know, newspapers like this really prop up that fabric in a community.
We still have some diehards. Hey, want their paper. That's fine, we'll do it.
I don't think that people really do realize the importance of local journalism.
Right now, we have, about 6 or 7 conglomerates, corporations who own all the main media. Something seems to be wrong with that.
A lot of these news organizations who ran so long on ads in the paper aren't getting that same revenue anymore.
Valley Publishing used to have 5 newspapers under it, now it's 1.
A lot of times these publications are the lifeblood of the people that are around them.
You know what is going on statewide, but you don't necessarily know what is going on in your community.
Without that information, how can a community talk about the issues, the challenges? You can't talk about that unless you're all on the same page. I'll leave it on her desk. Thank you. You can get online and read the fake news or the real news, or, there's a lot of good journalism happening on that level. But my readers need to know what's happening right here. And we're the only ones doing that.
In the heartland, we rely on ourselves and one another. Hand in hand, we must stand in the heartland.
Production funding for Life in the Heartland was provided by
Can everybody agree on what is the news? The answer is no.
What is the news? The real news? The real news is when you hear a siren on your street and it stops at your neighbor's house.
News is anything that's of interest and concern to this community.
You have to be accountable to the community. How do you get to the truth? How do you get to the facts? Like, how do you make sense of your world?
Reporting on a smaller scale is just as important as on a larger scale.
We all disappear and become news deserts. Doesn't look pretty. Studies have shown voter percentage drops. The cities have trouble issuing bonds. Newspaper does a lot of things people don't realize. The price keeps going up and up and up. Labeling the papers, sorting the papers, now delivering them to, half a dozen post offices ourselves. For little mom and pop community newspapers like us, it's a huge burden.
The collapse of newspapers seems to be a very regional thing. So some newspapers will just fall off the cliff in Hanover County.
I've seen the Virginian Pilot shrink from this to this, Community papers are struggling to hold on to the definition of what they used to be.
After all of these, pay cuts and these corporations that are, buying off these newspapers but don't really emphasize on the local factor, I really don't know how journalism is still surviving, but it still is.
One thing the Recorder isn't, and really never has been, is sort of tabloid, sensational. Back here, folks want us to go to their kids' softball games. They want us to be at the meetings so they don't have to. They want to know, is this pipeline going to ruin their well if it comes through? Is their water clean? They care about where they live.
Jake's Convenience.
Yeah.
And then
Mountain Dew.
yeah, Mountain Dew.
I'll give you guys.
So not only do I play Tetris by putting the page layout together, I also play Tetris trying to get this to fit in this car.
We used to pay people to do these routes, but again, as we couldn't afford staff. David and I just picked them up. We're hyper-local. We report on anything happening in these 3 counties. People care about, are their taxes going up? Are their water bills going up? Folks care very much about their children.
This is my 42nd year of high school football. Local sports, we have a little bit of an advantage because we put something out there that you can't get through Sports Center or whatever. And seeing people that I've covered for 40 years, they're still my closest friends.
We're not hard to find. Good morning. They see us in church, at school, you know, they see us in the grocery store. You like the paper, don't you?
I do like the paper.
This will hold you accountable, right? It's like, oh, I can't get this wrong because I'm going to see them next week at the 4th of July.
They kind of trust me to weed out what they say and what needs to be printed, what doesn't need to be printed.
We have about 200 people in Monterey. We know and love these folks, right? We care about them. Anybody I ever hire, I say, once you start working for us, you are a public figure.
I write about the Holcomb hairy man, Bigfoot. It's kind of a big hit among the outdoorsmen. The hunters, old men, young men, approach me every time they see me and say, I'm looking forward to the next episode.
And I like the new family that you introduced this week.
And he's a time traveler. They never dreamed that a pastor would write something like this.
Yes.
Maybe 100 years from now, people will think it's really true.
And that's going to be your legacy.
Yeah, that's kind of bad. That's kind of bad.
This newspaper was established October 20th in 1877. It's never missed an issue. There's not a lot of sensational news, although there's never a dull moment. Old typewriter, of course. You can guess what this did. Roll in the ink roller. This is the only newspaper I've ever worked at. I know a lot of publishers of daily papers, but I've never worked at one. What I hear on the ground from the folks who work for those papers are their papers' ownership keeps changing. They don't know if they're going to have a job tomorrow. There's so many layoffs in recent years. The corporations who buy a chain, they reduce the staff to where there's one editor left in the newsroom. Those guys I feel for. I'll let Kirk explain to you what this building was. When you pop in to a place where you don't know, it's not easy to get everything right. It makes it much easier to do your job if you really know those connections.
I really believe that the news media should reflect the communities they serve. It's important for reporters and editors and even owners to come from the communities. So this is our television studio, complete with a cyclorama, green screen. I started at a Black newspaper in Los Angeles, even though that's a big city. The Black community is not that large. And so what you find is information like about people you know, the family reunions and the class reunions and the parties that are coming up, who died, who's getting married, all kinds of intimate things that affect your life personally. If a reporter from, say, a Black community goes in and pitches an editor who doesn't understand that community, they'll probably say, you know, this is not a story. This is not something we want to cover. So the reporter is trying to talk about something important to them and their community, but the editor doesn't get it.
I was trying, New York Times and, Washington Post and trying to write for them. And, I wouldn't get responses. And it dawned on me, I'm like, every time I pitch Indian Country Today, they're saying yes. What is news and what isn't really depends upon who wants to tell the story. Who thinks what is important.
Oh, great.
Historically, the Mohawk people have always been the newsbringers. I used to maybe ride a horse, 1,000 years ago, but today I have a Toyota. Let's get you a chair. Let me look at 1,000 places at once. Who I am as a journalist started one way, and then it evolved into something different because I met so many different people. No, I do not want to switch to German. That's what I just said. I don't know what I touched.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Okay.
Okay.
Yes, you look gorgeous.
Okay.
Made him blush.
I'm like hot. I wasn't raised on the reservation. I wasn't raised immersed in my culture. So I had an excuse to ask questions that I didn't know on behalf of teaching the public.
I'll back up. It's been since 2012.
Okay.
We became state recognized in 2010, and we opened this building in 2012.
Community journalism is very similar to journalism within Indian country. A lot of times these are smaller publications. You know, there's our smaller tribal newspapers, just the same way there are smaller community newspapers.
I'd like to think that people are becoming more in touch with who they are. I am a product of the 60s, so we could say it's the age of Aquarius. But maybe it took coming into the 21st century to have things revealed.
The joy I get is bringing something that was spoken in closets out to the world.
This is a highway sign that was on 58 Highway that people would stop and read, okay.
Indians were living here as late as 1825.
Amazing. Amazing.
I think that we're still here, right?
A little bit, right. What this did to generations reading that sign. History has been distorted and misinterpreted, and putting it on a plaque or putting it on paper. You keep saying it, saying it, saying it. Next thing you know, oh, this is a real thing.
Things are so easily garbled. You worry that you're either missing news or that, are you getting it right? Are you being as fair as you can? You've been there.
You've probably long heard that, you know, journalists should be objective. So I don't believe that's possible. You know, we all have a bias. We're coming from somewhere, right? But we can try to be fair. You don't just listen to one person. You understand what that person's bias is. Are we getting all the sides of the story? Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 8. Fact-checking is a thing. We do it.
It's through the media's eyes that we find out what's happening in our legislature, in our public institutions.
Anybody can walk through there and say, what did you do here? What did you write here? So you're on the front lines. You're not, you know, behind a couple of security guards on the 5th floor.
You're not going to run a newspaper without making a few people mad. Fortunately, we've never had anybody come in and be violent. You know, it certainly has happened. I mean, at the Annapolis Capitol, there have been places where the newspaper office has been firebombed.
I was doxxed on social media, and I was getting phone calls night and day. I got things like, we will kill you. And I was just like, ooh, this is not good. And that happened many times.
It's something that does happen. You do think about it.
Yeah, I've had death threats in the past, you know, people really upset with something we've covered, but threatened to sue, but I'm still alive and I haven't been sued. I'm not anxious about it because I know these folks. If I've messed up or we've done something wrong, they just come to the house or they call me at home at night and go, I don't think you took the right turn there.
And you want to be fair. And people think that that newspapers or TV or that there's an agenda behind what you do and what you write and what you choose.
People don't trust the media anymore. And this is a problem because who do they believe?
While I saw this, community and that, everyone is very welcoming and so kind to everybody, when it came to politics and when it came to national issues and concerns, there was always this divide. And that is just something that I can't really fathom.
The public gets 4 kinds of information. They get the news, they get editorialization, and then they get disinformation and misinformation.
People will get their news somehow, some way, whether if it's right or wrong or whether if it's true or not.
When there are diverging opinions about what a fact is, we're in trouble.
We have these platforms that are incredibly diametrically opposed. You have CNN and Fox, which definitely don't share the same opinion. Where do you draw that line and what do you tell?
If you have people that are sort of on the right perspective mad at you sometimes, and you have people on the left perspective that are mad at you, you're probably where you ought to be.
You don't have to have a degree or a license or a permit to do this job. What you do need is a good education in the ethics behind it.
Journalists have a role to tell the truth. That's number one. When you're analyzing a story, what are you thinking about? Are you saying, now, is that a real city? Is that a real person?
April, are you looking at this or is...
Oh, there's a rumor that such and such a plant's going to come here. Well, when we see the permits, we'll print it. People will say, well, everybody knew it. I say, well, they might have known it, but they couldn't prove it. When they could prove it, it was in the paper. The racket over there is our dot matrix printer printing about 4,000 labels. It's a weekly paper, it comes out every Wednesday. We actually have a guy who sells out on the street corner on Wednesday mornings, and he starts about 5 o'clock in the morning. We're locally owned, it's owned by my family, has been for 4 generations. I think the white-haired guy was probably based on my great-grandfather. This is January through June of 1985. We're kind of out here on the end of the vine. We don't have an IT department. I'm the IT department. And if it goes down, I got to fix it.
If you scroll down.
This is the counter where people bring in press releases and obituaries and come in to pound on the desk of the editor when they're mad, so, which does happen from time to time. It's still important to have an open door that people can come in. It worries me greatly that there are newspapers that now no longer have physical presences in their communities. And there are some, if they do, their doors are locked. As far as I'm concerned, they might as well take their ball and go home.
Oh, okay. 7 BB pencil. Yeah, it's 7. 7, not 8, so that's the difference.
Even with 6 people, we can't be in all these. This is a big county. 3 school board meetings, 3 government meetings, 3 planning commission meetings.
All right, she's changed that to 7.
Okay.
Accepted.
And we're not gonna.
It's because we count.
We get a little punchy at this time of day.
We're finally getting it to you. Everything should be your way in about 5 minutes, okay? I get this one.
And went home and back to work.
Kids do the darndest things.
You know, if we have bad weather in the wintertime, I always kind of sweat Tuesday nights. We haven't missed many. We've been doing it this way for close on to 30 years, and I can count on the fingers of 2 hands the times we've not made the mail. The big challenge is how do we generate enough revenue to keep this newsroom going? We serve 2 masters, locally owned community papers. We obviously have to make sure the paper remains profitable, but we also have that civic responsibility of covering our communities.
There's David's mom. She walks every day down to the store. Thank you, dear. Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
All right. What are y'all filming?
Oh, yeah, they're filming. I would really like to keep this newspaper going because I think it's so critical to do. How you doing, Sugar?
All right, how are you?
I'm good. Nobody's ever gonna make a lot of money running a newspaper or working for a newspaper. But I would like for it not to be quite as hard. Come on, dude. It's Mike McRae blocking the way. You know, at one point years ago, this community had probably 6,000 people in the county. It started to steadily decline. The kids grow up, they can't find work here, they end up having to leave, go somewhere else. We have more deaths than we have births. That's the way it's going. back when we had a big staff. You know, these were all full. So this is a cleaning in process, but this used to be my office. So I had a desk in here. They're my little children. We shut the press room down in 2000. This is where we used to keep the newsprint, and there's some still here. Reduced staff then. When the recession hit, some folks just left sort of as they went. We didn't replace them. Here's your ampersand. Imagine putting every letter. Newspaper rack. We stopped using these when we went to $1. We're $5 off the news rack now. That's expensive. Nobody carries around $5 in quarters. I like the fact that we've been here so long. We're really considered less of a for-profit business trying to hang on. People treat us as theirs, like as almost it was like we're the public library. And I like that very much. But they also, it makes it harder to sell later. It's like, okay, you know, can't you just give us a subscription? Why do you have to charge so much? Well, you know, we do have bills to pay. Always in this industry, it's been the 3 Ps, you know, payroll, postal, and printing.
Classified ads used to be, I think, 60–70% of revenue. When I was a reporter, I didn't care about what went around the stories. Now it's pretty much everything.
Do we have enough advertising to add 8 pages this week or no? And if not, that means tougher decisions about what we can publish and what we can't. Look at these margins. The weekly is a good pace. There are times when I wish I had at least one more issue in a week, but I don't know how I would make that happen. So this feels like a good pace. And it fits with what we call, you know, Allegheny Mountain Town, right? A little slower. Keep us all sane.
She had like this cloak on, and I thought it was a bear standing up. It turned out to be an Amish woman standing there.
To go down to the local place and sit with your friends and reminisce about, you know, a game they played in and something I wrote about. It's something a small town does that you can't get in a big city.
We just had an increase of 72 students this new academic year. That's the exciting part, too, is that we are able to train them in reporting real news that's fact-based and fact-checked. I see them struggling on one side, but I see them succeeding on the other side.
I knew that the job hunting journey was going to be hard, but I was so determined to become a reporter. I mean, that was just my dream job.
There's nothing I do as a Native American journalist that doesn't touch something about tradition, culture, history, etc. I do have things that I like to tell in my way, and other people have theirs to tell in their way, and that's great. And that's the nature of news.
We talk about how, well, we're living in these times are the worst ever. Well, I think that's not true. I think every generation has its polarizing issues. But it's a very tiny number of people who are actually tearing at the fabric of society. I think most people want to get along with other people. There's that will, there's that power. There's always people that try to bring you together.
I'm somewhat optimistic about what local journalism can mean to those things that are driving us apart. Anything that helps people see each other as people.
Every human being suffers the same pain and the same joy that you do. And it's real and it's true. And every day you have to remind yourself of that, and that's the only thing that matters, actually.
We're the headwaters for the Potomac and the James. So everything we do to the rivers up here, you know, affects all the way to Richmond, you know. A lot of different things hold a society together. But having a common place for information, I think, is a huge piece of that. Do I think someday we probably won't be printing? Maybe. Not on my watch, though. You know, I think we have, you know, some solid years ahead yet, if we can just hang on.
Production funding for Life in the Heartland was provided by
Who belongs? Is there room enough for all? Who belongs? Do we stand or do we fall? And is there room in our hearts for this whole land?